Okay, so I guess if you guys would like to state your names.
Right. I'm Liz Hubbell.
I'm Barbara Gill.
Alright, and we're just doing an interview for the Intercultural Project on pre-primary education and things like kindergarten or early education. So the first question is, do you think that this kind of education is important?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's absolutely invaluable, particularly as the children come from such diverse home situations that some children sadly have no interaction in any form of education in the home setting. So if they don't go into some more formalised setting, I think they start on the back foot.
I think it helps so that then by the time you have children in year one, if they hadn't had that early years experience, you would really feel the difference when you try and start doing more hard-hitting curriculum type work. The difference between the ones who had had something much more enriching at home and the ones who hadn't had that would be much harder to have to manage in a year one classroom.
And it's also the socialisation, because the children who have not been into a kindergarten or early years setting, and they come into school, the social setting is a real shock. And it's things like turn taking, if they've never had to take turns or share. It's all of that long before you get into a learning process. It's about how to live as part of a community.
And just getting used to school routines and things. Sometimes children who be in a sort of preschool daycare setting have some of those sorts of routines in place, but if children haven't had any of that kind of thing, it's hard for them to get used to just the routines that are a necessity to make school work for them. So that's another big benefit of getting them in when they're young so that they can start to establish those routines.
Alright, well, another one that we're looking into is just any effective policies that have been in place for this kind of education. Do you know of any in Canada or England, as we're looking at both of them?
Effective policies that have helped to sort of improve early years provision.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest ones over here is the early years funding, which, so from 2, they get a package of funding. So it's not about only the children from more affluent families can do this, because I think, is it 30 hours funding they get? Yeah. So, and that's to everybody.
Regardless of your family income, you get that support as a family so that you can afford for your child to have some early years provision.
So that was a great thing when that came in, because I think historically there were families who would have liked their children to have had access to it but couldn't afford it. So this means the funding is there, and you don't have to use it all in one setting. If you wanted your child to experience 2 different kinds of settings, you've got your pot of money.
And parents can self-allocate that.
And they do it through a website and allocate the money to the setting. And
I suppose in some ways that's kind of what Ontario moving to full-day, full-time junior kindergarten achieved in a similar sort of way for 3 and 4-year-olds. It provides that universal provision regardless of who your family is, what jobs are in the family, that kind of thing. It's just done in a slightly different way here.
That's made a big difference over here. And that's made a big difference to how children come in prepared for school, because money did preclude a lot of people, a lot of families from taking up that.
And I think that also means that because those families then have those children, it's a terrible phrase, but sort of in the system, it also means that for children where then something comes up where the staff who have the training and know what to look for realize that, there's a language concern here, or other things that actually a health visitor wouldn't maybe have picked up if they're not in the home all the time, or the parents may not have the knowledge to see something that could be concerning. It means that those other sorts of services that are available, they can get working with those children much, much sooner, which for things like language especially can have a massive impact if you can pick those kids up at age 2 or 3 rather than not picking it up until they're 5 or 6. Really helps to catch up things like language, hopefully make a difference earlier on. So I think that makes a big difference too, simply that once you get kids in so that more professionals are having contact with those children, it helps them access things they otherwise might not.
And I think the same as that, but it's the same with the well-being of the child.
Yes.
The fact that they're being seen in a different setting. If there is anything going on that you just feel a little bit uncomfortable about, you can pick that up early, because there are, sadly, there are still a core group of people who don't access this, and you do have to query the why don't they want their child to do that.
Yeah, so from a safeguarding standpoint, it has possibly, hopefully, prevented some little people from slipping through the cracks where nobody could see what was going on at home and what the problems were until they got to school, and by then a lot of damage can be done. So that helps too.
Alright, thank you. And then, as you know, we're also working with the Japanese students, and they're doing the same sort of questions in Japan.
Right.
So one of our questions is just seeing if anybody on our part knows anything about any kind of policies in Japan. So would you guys have any idea of any educational issues going on in Japan?
I don't.
The only knowledge I have of early years or primary provision in Japan is from my own travels, and I have a friend who works in a primary school. That being said, it's a private school. So what I have seen when I have gone and visited his school is probably not particularly representative of what happens in all Japanese kindergartens. However, from my very short interaction with him and his family and his school when I've been there, I know at least at that private school, the intake process was very eye-opening compared to what we have here. The children were being put through a whole bank of assessments and looking at their sort of linguistic ability and their early mathematical ability, and they were doing physical tests of running.
So they're taking the crane.
Yeah, running and jumping and hopping, and then those were the children who got the spaces. But that was because it was a competitive private program, so they could afford to be choosy, and their policies allowed that. So I'm sure that's not really representative of overall early years provision in Japan. My impression also from having spoken to his family and some of the other people who I spoke to, along with him, who then kind of would open up to me a little bit about their children's education, was that the provision for children who need something a little different in Japan, I understand, is quite different from our policies here. So a little girl who's daughter of someone I know in Japan, I think in Britain she would be in a mainstream classroom, but she probably would have been involved in lots of intervention programs for her reading and for her language skills, and she would have had lots of TA support, and she might have had some sort of time where she went out with smaller groups and things because she was struggling, and yet I think she didn't seem to have any sort of severe learning disability. She was just a bit of a slower learner, and she was still very, very young. The decision in Japan was made that she was not right for mainstream provision because that differentiation was just not on offer. So instead, she was removed from the mainstream school that her brothers go to, and she was sent to a different school. So in the morning, her brothers turned right, and she turned left and went to a different school. So that just struck me as it may still have been giving her something fantastic for what she needed, but a really different approach towards that sort of early intervention around...
and the lack of differentiation.
Yeah, the lack of differentiation is definitely a different style. And when I sat in on classes, they weren't early years classes, but slightly older classes in the primary school that I visited there, there certainly was... I was probably missing a lot because of my non-existent Japanese, but there certainly didn't seem to be the obvious sort of separate groupings of children being given activities at their own level that fit them. It was everybody does this, everybody's following what's on the board, one teacher in the room, very large class, and they all just had to keep up. And if they needed something extra, their parents could pay for extra help in the evening. So again, really different from what we would be expected to provide for students here. And yet, I was probably missing layers upon layers of what was really going on because of the language barrier. So, a little tiny window into education there, but I think until you're really in a system, there's no way to really understand how staff in any school are giving children what they need until you're really embedded in it. So, yeah.
And then, do you guys know of any other ongoing issues just in any other country around the world? Just anything that you find concerning, or even like you find they do better in a different country than compared to England?
Specific to early years?
Yeah.
Well, I guess we know that some of our neighbours further north in Scandinavia do early years education very differently.
They don't start till 7, do they?
That being said, there is a different structure of social support for families around childcare costs.
And it's learning through play, through that. It's not that they don't do anything, is it? It's just it's not formalised learning as we would know it.
Curriculum is not
it's more like
set in the same way.
Outdoor learning.
Yeah. And you read all sorts of things about how that's wonderful and how that has problems. So there's both. I don't know in terms of other European countries what differences, not lots that you really hear a lot made of in the profession. Obviously, you know, you do read things about provision or lack thereof for not just early years, but any education access for children in countries that are less affluent. You know, struggles in lots of African countries with simply recruiting enough teachers for the number of children that they have in their schools. There not being the government funding for children to attend school full time because they have such a population of children for such a small taxpayer base that, you know, governments can only afford half days of education for children, and that parents have to pay for the other half and often can't. So there's lots of things, you know, we think we have problems with funding. We are so unbelievably fortunate compared to what lots of educators in lots of countries face.
As a school, we used to help fund schools in Sierra Leone and different other African subcontinents, didn't we? And one of the big things the children here used to raise funds for was uniform, because the children there could not go to school unless they had complete school uniform.
And parents had to fund that.
The parents had to fund it, but they were incredibly poor, living in abject poverty. The children were desperate to go to school. The parents did not have the money, so our school did fundraising to send monies to buy school uniform and shoes, because it was a very strange position that they couldn't go to school unless they had the clothes, but they didn't have the clothes because they couldn't afford the clothes.
And they couldn't afford the clothes because they couldn't get the education to get the jobs.
And to try and explain that to our children was really quite complex. They found
even
that quite
though
hard.
Our families provide their own uniform, and yet what lots of children don't realise is that there are also supports in this country for parents who can't afford the uniform. We would make sure that happened, so it would never be a barrier. So that's a big difference, that kids here just have no realization of some of those challenges. I think the only other thing that comes to mind is that, you know, in lots of countries, but also I think in this country, that there are big regional differences in the provision for young children and throughout school, but that it can have a real impact at the early years stage if you're living in an area that is not as affluent or that there isn't the same quality of provision. It can be a bit of a postcode lottery.
And I think it's also in certain of our inner cities where we have a lot of obviously different races. In a number of the early years settings, it's getting the children into settings that speak the where they've got people who can speak the home language, because
with large immigrant groups in some communities, that's a big challenge for educators, and the funding is not always there to provide the support that teachers need. Some schools have got 15 different languages in one class, and how you even begin to provide that support, especially when children are so little that you can't get too creative with other sorts of resources.
Particularly if the parents have no English as well, and you're trying to build that relationship, and obviously this is a new country and they're scared and they're worried, and you know, and I think that's where we need more funding put in to help in these. It's particularly the inner cities, isn't it? It's not so much the rural areas.
Not so much, although you know that does spread out into the rural areas, and you know with refugees coming into the country, where often those are the families who are most desperately in need of things like mental health resources that are out there, but how do you connect those families with those resources they so desperately need when there's such a language barrier? So that's very challenging. And sometimes there is really great work happening between preschools and schools and community leaders and people who represent certain communities within cities, so that there is support and that, you know, communities come to trust the system. Because I think that's the other thing, is that teachers sometimes don't realize that families may be coming from a country where government institutions, schools included, we're not to be trusted, we're not helpful, and so there's a real long-term, slow process of building trust that has to happen there. Although we have families who have been in Britain for many generations where you have that same challenge. You have to build up a relationship of trust with parents who have had negative experiences of education, and it takes a while from the day they walk in first with that little person to convince them that you are on their side. So that can be a challenge for all kinds of communities, even ones who are long established in this local area. Does that give you lots to work with?
Yeah, that pretty much answered a lot of my next question, which was just like, I guess, what issues have you found and what have you learned through your own experience?
How long have you got?
Yeah. To me, I think the biggest thing is something Liz has just touched on. It's building the relationship. If you can build the relationship with the parent and get them on side, because as Liz alluded to, many of the parents had bad experiences themselves or little experience of school at all, and they have this mindset of, well, I didn't go to school or I didn't do it at school and it hasn't done me any harm, and it's trying to build the relationship for them to trust you, to have the child and to see that school attendance is important, and that's all down to the relationship. If they don't trust you, it's never going to happen. And sometimes it's very hard to build a trusting relationship when somebody who can be very aggressive towards you or very angry towards you, or rather not you, the system, and you're keeping your professional smile on the whole time and trying to get them on board. But when you do it and you come out the other side of it, it's so positive.
The rewards are huge,
yes,
but it doesn't happen overnight.
It all hinges on the relationship.
Yeah. And I wonder if maybe, you know, thinking about possible differences between, you know, experience working in education in Britain and in Japan is, I know that there is a very different attitude towards teachers as well across different countries. And I think sometimes, unfortunately, in some communities in Britain, people who have had their own personal negative experience of education or of specific teachers in their past, they don't start off with a relationship of respect towards people in schools, working in schools. And so you're already on the back foot when you begin, having to just get some basic respectful conversation out of people. Because we have found, haven't we, that a number of our parents who have come to us from overseas, from very different cultures, have been far more respectful to us as professionals than, and much more trusting of our own knowledge as professionals. Whereas some of our local families, sometimes that's not there. They are not as respectful as you would think they might be. Yes. So there definitely is some cultural difference that I think you can paint some broad strokes about there, which can be really challenging. Yeah. And, you know, a kid's time in primary school is short. It goes fast. And if it takes you 3 or 4 years to convince the parents that you're on their side and you're trying to do right by their kid, that's a lot of the time that they're in your school before you really can feel that you started to build something positive where you're working together with this family. And I think it's trying to get over that thing to children. Children often perceive what you're doing as nagging. And what you're trying to get over to them is you're not nagging. You're trying to, you know, give them all the tools they need to move forward with their learning. But they see it as a negative. And it's, again, that comes to the relationship. And eventually, with the majority, they realise that you're actually doing it for all the right reasons and not as a negative. Yeah, but if a parent has only ever experienced something that has felt very critical in school themselves, they'll be right there backing up their kid that you're on their back all the time because they can't see that it could be any different. How could they if that's never what they experienced? So yeah, that can be a tough road, but it's worth it when it works out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
All right. Well, that's about all I've got to ask.
Good.
So, thank you very much.
No problem.
Welcome.